Yes, 9 on 11? I need police immediately. There's a black woman who stole a Mercedes and she's threatening me. Deborah Fleming's voice cracked with fabricated fear as she pressed her phone to her ear, her red cardigan trembling as she pointed accusingly at Dr. Laura Simmons, who stood calmly beside her own vandalized vehicle in the bright afternoon sunlight. The woman's acting aggressive, and I think she has weapons. Please hurry, I'm scared for my life. Deborah's performance was Academy Award worthy, complete with crocodile tears, while multiple neighbors emerged from their upscale homes with phones raised, recording every word of the lie that was about to destroy Deborah's world. When the police chief himself arrived to answer this particular domestic call. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. The sun was very high in the afternoon sky over Maple Grove, causing extremely long shadow, but nothing could relieve the darkness over 208-47 Willowbrook Drive. Dr. Laura Simmons stood like a pro at a hospital emergency room as she stared at the fresh scratches on the paintwork of her Mercedes. Deborah Fleming's car has the scars of someone's anger, but it is not just anger. It is the anger inflicted with malice by a racist. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," said Dr. Laura Simmons quietly, with the same steady command as when she informs families that their loved one has died. "This is my vehicle. I live here." But her reasoned words only seemed to incite a performance for the 9/11 operator from Deborah Fleming. Deborah Fleming, a woman in her mid-40s with perfectly styled blonde hair that matched her sense of entitlement, clutched her phone like a weapon while her free hand gestured wildly. Her red cardigan and crisp white skirt suggested someone who had never worked a day in her life, supported by family money and sustained by the belief that her skin color gave her authority over anyone who looked different. "She's getting more aggressive," Deborah shrieked into the phone, though Dr. Laura Simmons hadn't moved from her position beside the driver's door. "I think she's reaching for something." The lies flowed from Deborah's lips with practiced ease, each fabrication building upon the last. She had already established the theft narrative, painted Dr. Laura Simmons as the aggressor, and now she was escalating to suggest weapons and violence. Dr. Laura Simmons recognized the pattern immediately. She had treated too many victims in her emergency room who had been targeted by exactly this type of calculated deception. Mrs. Gloria Henderson, who lives in the colonial house across the street, stepped out with silver hair in a blue jacket over a flowered shirt. At 73, she had seen enough neighborhood drama to know something remarkable was happening. With trembling hands, she brought up her smartphone to film. Something told her that this moment she was recording would matter more than just today. "I've never seen anything like this," Mrs. Henderson murmured to herself, not quietly enough that the phone didn't pick it up. "The poor woman has done nothing wrong." Tyler Johnson, who lives 2 houses down, came bursting out of his front door in an orange t-shirt and khaki shorts, obviously in his 20s. He was well aware of the importance of documentation thanks to his work as a social media manager at a local marketing business. His jog brought him closer to the camera, its zoom rendering the subject in extreme close-up. "This is insane," Tyler whispering into his phone, while unknowingly lived to his 300 followers. "There is some lady losing her mind about a Mercedes in our neighborhood." Dr. Laura Simmons felt the familiar weight of being watched, judged, and presumed guilty until proven innocent. She had experienced this her entire life. In medical school, when professors assumed she was there on charity rather than merit, in hospitals where patients requested different doctors, and now in her own neighborhood where she paid property taxes that probably exceeded Deborah Fleming's annual income. But she had learned long ago that dignity was her strongest weapon against ignorance. "Ma'am," Dr. Laura Simmons said again, her voice carrying across the growing crowd of onlookers. "I have my keys, my registration, and my insurance cards. This is my vehicle." She held up her key fob, pressing the lock button twice. The Mercedes responded with its distinctive chirp and flashing lights. But Deborah Fleming had committed too deeply to her performance to acknowledge reality. "Those probably got stolen too," Deborah screamed into her phone. Her conviction was so loud that several neighbors cringed. "These people know how to steal everything. Cars, keys, probably broke into someone's house." Deborah's prior accusations suddenly took a turn and exhibited highly racist tones that have risen to the surface. As she heard those two words, "these people," Dr. Laura Simmons felt her jaw clench. She had heard this phrase before, always a little dehumanizing. She heard it in the hospital hallways, at the medical conference, and now on her own street. As a result of noise and Deborah's increasingly hysterical call, more neighbors started emerging. The family in the corner house, the Patels, strolled on the well-maintained grass of their lawn when their teenage daughter took out her phone. A young couple from the townhouse complex walked over with their golden retriever, wearing expressions of confused concern. "Hurry along," Deborah continued to act, this time walking in small circles while fixing her eyes on Dr. Laura Simmons. "I'm scared because she is standing in front of me and looks dangerous." Dr. Laura Simmons almost laughed at the absurdity. She was 5'6", wearing business attire and holding medical journals she had been carrying from her car to her house when this nightmare began. If anything, she looked like exactly what she was, a professional woman returning home from work. But she understood that Deborah Fleming wasn't seeing a doctor or a neighbor or even a human being. Deborah was seeing a threat to her perceived social order. "The operator wants to know if she has any weapons visible," Deborah announced loudly, as if the 911 dispatcher was conducting a public interview rather than an emergency call. "I can't tell. She might be hiding something in her purse or her pockets." Tyler Johnson moved closer, his phone capturing every word as his livestream audience grew. The comment section was exploding, with viewers recognizing the injustice unfolding in real time. Several neighbors were now recording from different angles, creating a comprehensive documentation of Deborah Fleming's racist meltdown. Dr. Laura Simmons slowly reached into her purse, moving deliberately to avoid any motion that could be misinterpreted. She withdrew her hospital identification badge, the same badge that had granted her access to operating rooms where she had saved hundreds of lives, and held it up for everyone to see. "I'm Dr. Laura Simmons," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the growing crowd. "I'm head of trauma surgery at City General Hospital. I live at 2847 Willowbrook Drive, and this is my car." But Deborah Fleming had moved beyond the realm of rational thought. She was committed to her narrative, and Dr. Laura Simmons' credentials only seemed to enrage her further. "She's showing me some fake ID now," Deborah shrieked into her phone. "Probably stolen that too. These people will steal anything." Mrs. Henderson lowered her phone and shook her head. "That lady's gone mad," she told Tyler Johnson, who nodded while keeping his camera trained on the action. "Dr. Simmons is one of the best people in the area." The sun was getting warmer since more of the neighbors were coming out, creating some sort of auditorium around Deborah Fleming. She had a real problem with someone and overestimated herself. The irony is that she believes she is better than them and that they are the problem, but it is her. Dr. Laura Simmons felt her phone vibrate with text messages, probably from colleagues wondering why she was late for their dinner plans. Her normal life felt a million miles away from this surreal confrontation, but she remained rooted in place, understanding instinctively that running would only validate Deborah's false narrative. "How long until the police arrive?" Deborah demanded of her phone, her performance growing more desperate as she realized the crowd wasn't rallying to her support. "This is taking too long. She could attack me any second." It can be heard from far off, the sirens. It is slowly beginning to come in closer. Dr. Laura Simmons felt both relief and dread. The nightmare was almost over, But the medical officer did not have the same confidence as the police. How would the officers see this? She had come across a lot of news stories starting like this. The sirens grew louder, and Deborah Fleming's face showed vindictive satisfaction. My God, finally. She ended the call and put the phone in her bag. Let us find out who is worthy of this place. Dr. Laura Simmons took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She envisioned her husband Robert, busy in his office, poring over case materials. Little did he know, his wife would soon be involved in a racial incident that would challenge everything they both stand for as justice and community. She thought of her patients, the human lives who trusted her with their life. Would they be okay with watching her be treated like a criminal in her own driveway? The sirens got louder, and Tyler Johnson's live stream gained even more viewers as people began to notice the argument in Maple Grove and spread the word on social media. I think it is the time when your phone camera can result in tangible consequences. Mrs. Henderson clutched her phone tighter. If all went well, her footage would corroborate exactly what happened, as opposed to what Deborah Fleming had let on. As the lead squad car turned on to Willowbrook Drive, Dr. Laura Simmons steeled herself for a conversation that would either validate everything she had worked for or destroy it in minutes. As she observed the lead officer arriving at her scene, she felt assured that he would be astonished at her identity. He wouldn't know that Deborah Fleming's racist gamble was about to spectacularly backfire on her in unbelievable ways. The location was ready. The spectators were recording, and justice was about to arrive in a uniform. On the immaculate sidewalk, Deborah Fleming ended her call to 911, her red cardigan wrinkled from her animated gestures as the brutal abuse of the afternoon sun threw shadows. She grasped her phone like a weapon, with narrow eyes full of malice and righteousness as she turned back towards Dr. Laura Simmons, surprisingly calm beside her defaced Mercedes. "The police will be here shortly," Deborah said out loud. "They will take care of the mess quickly." Dr. Laura Simmons inhaled slowly as she stepped forward, extending her hands in a visible but non-threatening way. "I think you are misunderstanding something, ma'am. This is my car. I live right here." She pointed to the nice two-story house behind her, with its lovely lawn and pricey landscaping, suggesting the neighborhood's wealth. "Your automobile?" Deborah laughed harshly, the sound washing over the surrounding houses. "Please, do you actually think anybody would believe you could afford a car like that? In a neighbor like that?" Dr. Laura Simmons caught the mean look of a woman who clearly thought she was superior. The woman looked Dr. Simmons up and down and spoke in a patronizing voice. Her prejudices were obvious to everyone ears within earshot. The comment hit Dr. Laura Simmons like a physical blow, but she maintained her dignity. "Someone like me? What exactly do you mean by that?" Her voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm surface. "Oh, don't play dumb," Deborah snapped, emboldened by what she mistook for community silence as support. "We all know what's happening to neighborhoods like ours. People like you move in, property values drop, crime goes up, and now you're here stealing cars right in broad daylight, thinking nobody will say anything." Mrs. Gloria Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had been watching from her front porch, shifted uncomfortably. Her blue jacket caught the breeze as she took a hesitant step forward. "Now, Deborah, maybe we should just wait for the police to sort this out properly." "Sort what out?" Deborah whirled around to face Mrs. Henderson. "Gloria, can't you see what's happening here? She's probably been watching our neighborhood for weeks, figuring out which cars to steal. And when I caught her red-handed, she starts making up stories about living here." She gestured wildly at Dr. Laura Simmons. "Look at her. Does she look like she belongs in Pine Ridge Estates?" Despite feeling the anger rise, she forced herself to remain calm. She slowly reached into her purse to make it obvious she was doing it. "Here are my keys," she said, showing a key fob for a Mercedes. "Here is my driver's license with this address." Deborah hardly looked at it before dismissing the evidence with a wave. "I highly doubt the keys of the vehicle, and the vehicle are yours. You look like the kind of scumbag that steals cars. Also, fake IDs? That's identity theft 101. You criminals are getting pretty sophisticated these days." The charge posed dangerously in the air. As Dr. Laura Simmons looked at the woman who appeared to have vandalized her property, she was also busy tearing down her character based on the color of her skin. "I'm a doctor, not a criminal." "A doctor?" Deborah's laughter was cruel and mocking. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England. Next you'll be telling me you went to Harvard Medical School or something equally ridiculous." More neighbors began emerging from their homes, drawn by the escalating confrontation. Tyler Johnson, a young man in his 20s wearing an orange shirt and dark jeans, appeared from the house across the street with his phone already recording. His expression was serious as he captured the unfolding drama. "Are you live streaming this?" Mrs. Henderson asked Tyler quietly. "Yeah," Tyler replied, not taking his eyes off the scene. "People need to see what's really happening here." Deborah noticed the phone and seemed to preen for the camera. "Good. Let everyone see how we handle car thieves in this neighborhood. This is what happens when good people stand up to crime." Dr. Laura Simmons noticed more phones appearing as other neighbors began recording. The situation was spiraling beyond anything she could have imagined when she'd simply pulled into her own driveway an hour earlier. "Ma'am, please." Dr. Laura Simmons tried once more. "If you would just look at my identification or call the number on my medical license, you'll see that I'm telling the truth." "The truth?" Deborah's voice rose to a near shriek. "The truth is that people like you think you can waltz into our neighborhoods, steal our cars, and then play victim when decent citizens try to stop you. Well, I've got news for you. Not in my neighborhood." She moved toward the Mercedes again and deliberately scraped her house key along the passenger side door, creating another long scratch in the pristine paint. "This is what happens to thieves around here." "Stop!" Dr. Laura Simmons called out, her professional composure finally beginning to crack. "You're vandalizing my property right in front of witnesses." "Your property?" Deborah turned back with renewed fury. "Still sticking to that story? Even with the police coming? You're either incredibly stupid or incredibly desperate." Mr. Franklin Torres, a middle-aged man in a green polo shirt and khaki pants, joined the growing crowd of onlookers. He looked uncomfortable as he took in the scene. "Deborah, maybe you should wait for the police before doing anything else to the car." "Franklin, whose side are you on?" Deborah demanded. "She's a car thief, probably part of some organized ring targeting our neighborhood. And you want me to just let her walk away?" Dr. Laura Simmons turned to address the gathering crowd directly. "I understand this looks strange to some of you, but I am Dr. Laura Simmons. I live at 247 Maple Drive, right behind me. I drive this Mercedes to and from my job as head of trauma surgery at City General Hospital every single day." "Director of trauma surgery? Are you the Dr. Simmons?" Tyler Johnson said, lowering his phone, "Like it has changed. You performed surgery on my sister following her car accident last year." Jennifer Johnson, Dr. Laura Simmons, was relieved when she saw a young man standing there. "Tyler?" "Indeed, I recall Jennifer. What's she up to?" "Her physiotherapy was going well the last time I checked." "She is doing great, thanks to you," Tyler said with respect and gratitude. He raised up his phone again, but his live stream was having a very different tone now. "Folks, this is Dr. Laura Simmons. She quite literally saved my sister's life." Deborah's confidence wavered for just a moment before she rallied. "Oh, please, you're probably in on it together. Some kind of elaborate scam to make her look legitimate." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward more boldly now. "Deborah, I think you need to stop this right now. Dr. Simmons has been living in this neighborhood for 3 years. She's never caused any trouble for anyone." 3 years? Deborah's voice cracked slightly. That's impossible. I would have noticed. You did notice, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. You've complained about her to the Homeowners Association multiple times. You said her music was too loud, her lawn service came too early, her dinner parties had too many cars parked on the street. Don't pretend you don't know exactly who she is. The revelation hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Several neighbors exchanged glances as they realized this wasn't a case of mistaken identity. This was something much darker. Dr. Laura Simmons stared at Deborah Fleming with new understanding. You know exactly who I am. You've always known. Deborah's face flushed red beneath her carefully applied makeup. That doesn't change anything. You still don't belong here. None of you do. This used to be a nice neighborhood before people like you started moving in and ruining everything. The mask had completely fallen away now. Tyler Johnson's live stream captured every word as Deborah Fleming revealed the true nature of her attack. The neighbors stood in stunned silence as they witnessed pure, unadulterated racism playing out on their quiet street. People like me, Dr. Laura Simmons repeated quietly. You mean black people. I mean criminals and troublemakers. Deborah shot back, but her words rang hollow now. People who don't respect property values or community standards like vandalizing your neighbor's car and filing false police reports? Dr. Laura Simmons asked. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to grow louder. Deborah Fleming straightened her red cardigan and lifted her chin defiantly. We'll see who the police believe, a respected community member like me, or someone like you with your made-up stories about being a doctor. Dr. Laura Simmons pulled out her phone and scrolled to her contacts. I think I should call my husband. He'll want to know what's happening. Your husband? Deborah laughed bitterly. What's he going to do? Come rescue you? Let me guess. He's probably got a rap sheet as long as my arm. Dr. Laura Simmons picked up the phone. The sirens got closer. Although it was the afternoon of the riot, the sun continued to beat down on the neighbors standing outside their houses. They all were holding their phones recording whatever was happening. The stage was set for a reckoning that would shake Deborah Fleming's world and vindicate Dr. Laura Simmons in ways that none of the witnesses could yet imagine. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as Dr. Laura Simmons stood beside her vandalized Mercedes, the fluorescent bright daylight casting sharp shadows across the upscale neighborhood street. Her green blouse remained pristine despite the chaos swirling around her, her dark pants unwrinkled as she maintained her composure in the face of Deborah Fleming's escalating racist tirade. Deborah Fleming's red cardigan had become disheveled during her vandalism spree. Her white skirt now bearing smudges from her aggressive assault on the luxury vehicle, her face flushed with self-righteous fury as she continued her performance for the growing crowd of neighbors, each word dripping with venomous assumptions and barely concealed hatred. You know what? Dr. Laura Simmons said quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to handling life and death situations. I think it's time I called my husband. The words hung in the bright afternoon air like a challenge, and Deborah Fleming's response was immediate and explosive. Her laugh was sharp and cruel, echoing off the well-maintained homes that lined their prestigious street. Your husband? Deborah Fleming shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that made several neighbors wince. Oh, this is rich. Let me guess, he's probably sitting in some jail cell right now. Or maybe he's out dealing drugs on some street corner. That's how you people afford cars like this, isn't it? Mrs. Gloria Henderson, the elderly neighbor in her blue jacket, visibly recoiled at the blatant racism spilling from Deborah Fleming's mouth. Her weathered hands gripped her phone tighter as she continued recording, her expression shifting from concern to disgust. Tyler Johnson, the young man in his orange shirt, had positioned himself for the perfect angle to capture everything on his live stream. His follower count was climbing rapidly as word spread about the unfolding confrontation. Comments flooded his screen, viewers expressing outrage at Deborah Fleming's behavior and admiration for Dr. Laura Simmons' dignified response to the assault. "Ma'am," Dr. Laura Simmons replied, with professional courtesy that only seemed to infuriate Deborah Fleming further. "I don't think you understand the situation you've created here." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Deborah Fleming snarled, gesturing wildly at the Mercedes with its keyed paint and damaged mirrors. "I understand that trash like you thinks you can just waltz into our neighborhood with your stolen cars and your attitude, acting like you belong here. Well, your criminal husband can't save you now." Dr. Laura Simmons reached into her purse with deliberate calm, retrieving her phone with the same steady hands that had performed countless surgical procedures. The device caught the overhead sunlight as she scrolled through her contacts, her movements precise and unhurried despite the chaos surrounding her. "Robert Carter," she said softly, reading the contact name aloud as she prepared to dial. Deborah Fleming's racist assumptions poured forth like poison. "Robert? Let me guess, that's some street name, right? Or maybe that's his alias when he's not busy stealing cars for you to drive around in. Does he even know you took his latest theft for a joyride?" The gathered neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Several more residents had emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion and the rapidly spreading social media coverage. A woman in a red blouse stood on her front porch, phone raised to record the scene. A middle-aged man in a green top had joined the growing crowd, his expression grave as he witnessed Deborah Fleming's racist meltdown. Dr. Laura Simmons pressed the call button, the soft electronic sound barely audible over Deborah Fleming's continued ranting. As the phone rang, she maintained her composed stance beside her vandalized vehicle, her professional demeanor unshaken by the verbal assault she was enduring. "Probably calling one of his drug dealer friends," Deborah Fleming announced to the crowd, her voice filled with malicious satisfaction. "Watch, she'll probably ask them to come threaten me, maybe bring some weapons. That's how these people handle their problems, with violence and intimidation." Mrs. Gloria Henderson had heard enough. "Deborah Fleming, that's completely inappropriate," the elderly woman called out, her voice carrying decades of authority. "You don't know anything about this woman or her husband." "I know enough," Deborah Fleming shot back, her red cardigan now completely askew as she gestured aggressively. "I know she doesn't belong here, and I know her husband is probably some criminal who can't protect her from the consequences of her actions." The phone call connected, and Dr. Laura Simmons' voice took on a warm, familiar tone that contrasted sharply with the hostility surrounding her. "Hi, honey. It's me." Deborah Fleming rolled her eyes dramatically for the benefit of her audience. "Oh, look at this act. Hi, honey," like she's calling some respectable businessman instead of whatever lowlife she's actually married to. Tyler Johnson's livestream chat was exploding with comments. Viewers from around the city were tuning in, many recognizing Dr. Laura Simmons from her work at City General Hospital. The disconnect between Deborah Fleming's racist assumptions and the reality of who she was attacking was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone except Deborah Fleming herself. "I'm having a situation here at home," Dr. Laura Simmons continued into the phone, her voice steady and professional. "Someone has vandalized our car and made some very serious false accusations. I think you need to come home." The way she said "our car" sent a small shiver of recognition through several neighbors who were beginning to piece together the implications of the conversation they were witnessing. But Deborah Fleming was too consumed by her racist narrative to notice the subtle cues that others were picking up. "Listen to her," Deborah Fleming announced triumphantly. "She's begging him to come save her. But what's he going to do when the police get here? Run? Hide? Maybe he's already wanted for something else." Dr. Laura Simmons listened to her husband's response with a small, knowing smile that held promises of justice. "Yes, I'm fine. Mrs. Fleming from down the street has made some very interesting claims about me and our Mercedes. She's also called 911 with what I believe are false reports. The mention of false reports should have given Deborah Fleming pause, but she was too intoxicated by her own sense of power to recognize the warning signs. Instead, she interpreted Dr. Laura Simmons' calm demeanor as weakness, her composed phone conversation as desperation. False reports. Deborah Fleming laughed harshly. The only false thing here is your claim that this car belongs to you. Wait until the police get here and run the plates. Then we'll see who's telling the truth. Several neighbors were now whispering among themselves, their conversations growing more animated as they began to suspect there was more to this story than Deborah Fleming realized. Mrs. Gloria Henderson was shaking her head sadly, her decades of life experience telling her that Deborah Fleming was making a terrible mistake. "Yes, I can wait for you," Dr. Laura Simmons said into the phone, her voice carrying undertones of meaning that only she and the person on the other end of the call could fully understand. "I think this situation will resolve itself very quickly once you arrive." Deborah Fleming's confidence was reaching its absolute peak. She began addressing the crowd like a prosecutor making her closing argument. "You see how calm she is? That's because she thinks her criminal husband is going to come intimidate us all. Well, I've got news for her. This is a respectable neighborhood, and we don't back down from thugs and thieves." The dramatic irony was becoming almost unbearable for the viewers of Tyler Johnson's live stream, many of whom had begun recognizing not only Dr. Laura Simmons, but were starting to piece together the significance of her married name. Comments flooded the chat with expressions of anticipation and warnings about what was coming. "I love you too." Dr. Laura Simmons concluded her call, her voice soft with genuine affection. "See you soon." As she ended the call, Deborah Fleming seized the moment to deliver what she believed would be her victorious speech. "Love you too," she mimicked in a cruel voice. That's probably the last time she'll be saying that before he abandons her to deal with the police alone. These criminals, they never stick around when real consequences show up. Dr. Laura Simmons slipped her phone back into her purse with the same deliberate calm she had maintained throughout the ordeal. Her green blouse remained immaculate, her professional bearing unchanged despite the sustained attack on her character and property. "Mrs. Fleming," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "I really think you should consider stopping this before it goes any further." But Deborah Fleming was beyond reason, too intoxicated by her perceived power and the audience she believed she was commanding. "Stop? Why would I stop when I'm about to be completely vindicated? When the police get here and arrest you for car theft, and when your husband turns out to be exactly the kind of criminal I know he is, this whole neighborhood will thank me for protecting them." The sound of approaching sirens began to drift across the upscale neighborhood, still distant but growing steadily louder. Deborah Fleming's face lit up with malicious triumph as she heard the approaching law enforcement response to her fabricated emergency call. "There," she announced, pointing down the street as if she had personally summoned justice itself. "That's the sound of reality coming for you and your criminal husband. Let's see how tough you both are when you're in handcuffs." Dr. Laura Simmons simply stood beside her vandalized Mercedes, her hands folded calmly in front of her, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth as the sirens grew louder. The afternoon sun continued to blaze overhead, casting everything in sharp, unforgiving clarity as the moment of truth approached. The dramatic tension had reached its breaking point, with Deborah Fleming's racist confidence at its absolute peak and Dr. Laura Simmons' quiet certainty promising a reckoning that would shatter every assumption Deborah Fleming had made. The stage was set for a revelation that would change everything. The wailing of sirens pierced through the afternoon air like a warning cry, growing louder with each passing second. Dr. Laura Simmons felt a wave of relief wash over her as she stood beside her vandalized Mercedes, her green blouse still crisp despite the chaos that had unfolded around her. The sound meant help was coming, though she knew the kind of help arriving would be far different from what Deborah Fleming expected. 3 police vehicles rounded the corner in quick succession, their red and blue lights painting the upscale neighborhood in alternating colors despite the bright daylight. The lead car, a black SUV with police chief emblazoned on the side, came to a controlled stop just yards from where the confrontation had been brewing. Behind it, 2 standard patrol cars followed suit, their occupants already preparing to handle what dispatch had described as a dangerous situation involving a stolen vehicle and an armed suspect. Tyler Johnson adjusted his phone's angle to capture the arriving officers, his orange shirt bright against the backdrop of his family's pristine front yard. "This is about to get real," he whispered to his live stream audience, which had grown to over 3,000 viewers in the past few minutes. Police chief just pulled up himself. Mrs. Gloria Henderson, her blue jacket neatly buttoned despite the warm afternoon, moved closer to her front window. She had lived in this neighborhood for 37 years and had never seen anything quite like what was unfolding. Her weathered hands gripped the windowsill as she watched the officers emerge from their vehicles. Chief Robert Carter stepped out of the lead vehicle, his short-sleeved police uniform immaculate and his bearing unmistakably authoritative. At 45, he cut an impressive figure with his muscular build and confident stride. He had responded personally to this call because the address was his own neighborhood, and the description of events had troubled him enough to leave an important budget meeting at City Hall. Officer Daniel Murphy emerged from the first patrol car, his hand instinctively checking his radio as he surveyed the scene. Behind him, Officer Rachel Collins stepped out of the second vehicle, her experienced eyes immediately taking in the crowd of neighbors, the damaged luxury car, and the 2 women at the center of the disturbance. Deborah Fleming's face lit up with vindicated triumph as she spotted the approaching officers. Her red cardigan seemed to pulse with renewed confidence as she smoothed down her white skirt and prepared to deliver her performance to the authorities. This was her moment of victory, the validation she had been waiting for since she first spotted Dr. Laura Simmons beside the Mercedes. "Officers, thank God you're here," Deborah Fleming called out, her voice carrying across the street with theatrical urgency. She rushed toward Chief Carter, her arms waving dramatically as she pointed back toward Dr. Laura Simmons. "That woman over there has stolen that Mercedes and has been threatening me." Chief Carter's professional demeanor remained intact as he approached, though his eyes were already scanning the scene with the trained observation of 23 years in law enforcement. He noted the crowd of neighbors with phones raised, the obvious damage to the silver Mercedes, and the 2 central figures of the reported incident. "She's been aggressive and hostile," Deborah Fleming continued, her words tumbling out in a rush of apparent relief and continued indignation. "I tried to reason with her, tried to explain that car doesn't belong to her, but she became violent and threatening. I was terrified for my safety." Officer Daniel Murphy pulled out his notepad, preparing to document the complaint, while Officer Rachel Collins positioned herself to observe both the complainant and the reported suspect. Neither officer noticed the subtle change that began to cross their chief's expression as his gaze settled on the woman standing calmly beside the vandalized vehicle. Dr. Laura Simmons remained composed, her dark pants unwrinkled and her posture dignified despite everything she had endured. She watched her husband's face carefully, seeing the exact moment when recognition dawned in his dark eyes. It started as a flicker of confusion, then shifted to unmistakable shock, followed by something much more intense. "She claimed the car was hers, but obviously that's ridiculous," Deborah Fleming pressed on, oblivious to the change in Chief Carter's demeanor. "People like her don't drive cars like that unless they've stolen them. I was just trying to protect our neighborhood from criminal activity." Chief Carter's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His professional training warred with the personal shock of seeing his wife of 12 years standing as the alleged perpetrator in what was clearly a false police report. The woman he loved, respected, and admired above all others was being painted as a dangerous criminal by this red-faced stranger in a red cardigan. Tyler Johnson's phone captured the moment perfectly as Chief Carter's expression shifted from professional interest to personal recognition to controlled anger. "Oh snap," Tyler whispered to his audience, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was witnessing. The police chief's face just changed completely. Mrs. Gloria Henderson pressed closer to her window, her experienced eyes catching the subtle interplay between the tall police chief and Dr. Laura Simmons. There was something in their eye contact, a communication that spoke of familiarity and connection that made her breath catch in her throat. "I demand she be arrested immediately," Deborah Fleming declared, her confidence reaching its absolute peak. "She vandalized my property, stole that vehicle, and threatened me with violence. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Dr. Laura Simmons met her husband's gaze across the distance between them, her expression calm, but speaking volumes to someone who knew her as well as Robert Carter did. In that look, he saw her strength, her patience under pressure, and the quiet confirmation that she was unharmed but had endured something terrible. Officer Daniel Murphy stepped forward, his pen poised over his notepad. "Ma'am, can you give us a detailed account of what happened here?" "Absolutely," Deborah Fleming responded eagerly, turning her attention to the younger officer while remaining unaware that Chief Carter's focus had shifted entirely to Dr. Laura Simmons. "I was coming home from my book club when I saw this woman tampering with that Mercedes. When I confronted her about the theft, she became belligerent and aggressive." Chief Carter took a step closer to the scene, his trained eye now cataloging details with personal rather than professional interest. He could see the key scratches along the Mercedes paint, the deliberate nature of the damage that spoke to intentional vandalism rather than attempted theft. He noticed his wife's composed posture, the way she stood with quiet dignity, despite being publicly accused of serious crimes. "She threatened to call her gang members to come after me," Deborah Fleming continued, her story growing more elaborate with each sentence. "I was in genuine fear for my life. Women like her are known to be dangerous, especially when they're caught in the act of committing crimes." The racist undertones in Deborah Fleming's statement hit Chief Carter like a physical blow. As an African-American police chief who had worked his way up through the ranks, despite facing his own share of prejudice, he recognized the coded language immediately. But hearing it directed at his wife, watching her endure such treatment in their own neighborhood, ignited a fury that he struggled to contain within his professional demeanor. Dr. Laura Simmons remained perfectly still, but those who knew her well would have recognized the slight lift of her chin, the subtle straightening of her shoulders that indicated her quiet vindication was beginning. She had faith in the system when the system was led by people of integrity, and she knew her husband embodied that integrity completely. Officer Rachel Collins noticed Chief Carter's intense focus on the alleged suspect and wondered about his unusual silence. Typically, the chief would have taken charge of questioning by now, but instead he seemed to be studying the woman in the green blouse with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years, Deborah Fleming declared, her voice rising with righteous indignation. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't. That woman has no business driving a car like that or being in a neighborhood like this. It's obvious she doesn't belong." Tyler Johnson's live stream chat was exploding with comments as viewers tried to interpret the tension they could sense but not fully understand. The young man kept his phone steady, instinctively knowing he was capturing something significant, even if he wasn't sure exactly what. Chief Carter's hands remained steady at his sides, but those who worked closely with him would have recognized the subtle signs of his growing anger. The slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes had hardened, the carefully controlled breathing that indicated he was managing intense emotions through sheer professional discipline. "She needs to be handcuffed and taken away immediately," Deborah Fleming demanded, turning back to Chief Carter with expectant confidence. "I won't feel safe until she's behind bars where people like her belong." The phrase "people like her" hung in the air like a toxic cloud, its implications clear to everyone present. Dr. Laura Simmons lifted her eyes to meet her husband's gaze again, and in that moment, Chief Carter saw not just his beloved wife, but every person who had ever faced such prejudice, every individual who had been judged by their appearance rather than their character. Mrs. Gloria Henderson gasped softly from her window as she witnessed the silent communication between the police chief and Dr. Laura Simmons. After nearly 4 decades in this neighborhood, she had developed an instinct for reading people and situations, and something profound was happening that Deborah Fleming remained completely oblivious to. The afternoon sun continued to shine brightly overhead, casting sharp shadows that seemed to divide the scene into areas of light and darkness, truth and deception, justice and prejudice. The stage was set for a revelation that would shatter Deborah Fleming's confident assumptions and vindicate Dr. Laura Simmons in the most dramatic way possible. Chief Carter's professional composure held firm, but storm clouds were gathering behind his eyes as he prepared to take control of a situation that had just become deeply, irrevocably personal. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows across the pristine suburban street as Chief Robert Carter stepped out of his patrol vehicle, his short-sleeved police uniform crisp and authoritative under the bright overhead light. The silver badge on his chest caught the sunlight as he surveyed the scene before him, his trained eyes taking in the crowd of neighbors, the damaged Mercedes, and the 2 women at the center of what dispatch had described as a potential theft and disturbance. Deborah Fleming immediately rushed toward him, her red cardigan flapping as she moved, her white skirt swishing with each hurried step. Her face was flushed with righteous indignation as she pointed dramatically at Dr. Laura Simmons, who stood calmly beside the vandalized luxury vehicle in her green blouse and dark pants. "Officer, thank goodness you're here." Deborah Fleming's voice carried across the quiet neighborhood, drawing more neighbors to their windows and doorways. "This woman has stolen that car, and she's been threatening me. She became violent when I tried to question her about why she was in our neighborhood. She doesn't belong here, and when I asked her reasonable questions about the vehicle, she started getting aggressive and hostile." Chief Carter's expression remained professionally neutral as he approached, but something in his posture shifted as his gaze fell on the woman standing beside the Mercedes. Officer Daniel Murphy and Officer Rachel Collins flanked him, their own uniforms neat under the bright daylight, notebooks ready to document what they expected to be a routine theft report. "She's been acting erratic and suspicious," Deborah Fleming continued, her voice growing more animated as she felt she had the police's attention. "I was just protecting our community, asking the kinds of questions any responsible neighbor would ask. But she got belligerent immediately, started making threats, and I had every reason to believe she was dangerous. Look at that car. There's no way someone like her could afford something like that legitimately." Mrs. Gloria Henderson adjusted her blue jacket and stepped closer, her phone still recording, while Tyler Johnson in his orange shirt live-streamed from his position near the sidewalk. The crowd of neighbors had grown larger, all of them capturing this moment as Deborah Fleming laid out her accusations with growing confidence. "I mean, just look at the situation objectively," Deborah Fleming said, gesturing broadly. "We have a very expensive vehicle, someone who clearly doesn't fit the demographic of our neighborhood, and aggressive behavior when questioned. I did exactly what any concerned citizen would do. I protected my community and called for help when I felt threatened." Chief Carter took another step forward, and something in his movement caused Dr. Laura Simmons to look up at him directly for the first time since the police had arrived. The moment their eyes met, his professional composure cracked slightly, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his eyes widened with recognition and growing concern. "She probably has accomplices," Deborah Fleming pressed on, oblivious to the change in the police chief's demeanor. "These kinds of operations are usually coordinated. They target nice neighborhoods like ours, thinking they can just walk in and take whatever they want. But we're not going to stand for it, are we, officer? We're not going to let them think they can just come into our community and steal from hard-working people." The words hung in the air like smoke as Chief Carter's recognition became complete. His wife stood there, calm and dignified, despite the clear evidence of harassment and vandalism around her. The scratches on their Mercedes caught the afternoon light, and he could see the stress in Laura's shoulders even as she maintained her composed exterior. Officer Daniel Murphy stepped forward to begin taking notes, but Chief Carter raised his hand in a gesture that stopped all movement on the scene. "Ma'am," Chief Carter said, his voice carrying an authority that cut through Deborah Fleming's continued accusations like a blade. "I need you to stop talking." The words weren't shouted, but they carried such command that Deborah Fleming's mouth snapped shut mid-sentence. The entire neighborhood seemed to pause, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Even the distant sounds of suburban afternoon life seemed to quiet. Chief Carter turned away from Deborah Fleming entirely and walked directly to Dr. Laura Simmons, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern and protective anger. "Laura, honey, are you all right?" The words hit the gathering crowd like a physical force. The silence that followed was so complete that the sound of phones continuing to record seemed loud in the stillness. Mrs. Gloria Henderson's eyes widened behind her glasses, and Tyler Johnson nearly dropped his phone as the implications of what they'd just heard began to sink in. Deborah Fleming's face went through a series of rapid changes. First confusion, as if she hadn't heard correctly. Then a dawning disbelief as she registered the familiarity in the police chief's voice. Her eyes darted between Chief Carter and Dr. Laura Simmons, searching for some explanation that would make sense of what she was witnessing. "Honey?" Deborah Fleming whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Dr. Laura Simmons looked up at her husband with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "I'm okay, Robert. Just shaken up. This woman has been harassing me for the past 20 minutes, vandalizing our car, and making some very disturbing accusations and comments." The word "our" fell into the silence like a stone into still water, creating ripples of realization throughout the crowd. Officer Daniel Murphy's pen paused over his notepad, and Officer Rachel Collins looked between her chief and the woman she now understood was his wife. Deborah Fleming's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Her hands trembled as the full weight of the situation began to crash down on her. "Wait," she stammered. "Wait, I don't understand. Your wife? But she was... I thought she was..." "You thought she was what?" Chief Carter asked, his voice deadly quiet. The professional control he maintained was impressive, but those who knew him could see the fury building beneath the surface. "Please finish that sentence." Dr. Laura Simmons stepped closer to her husband, her green blouse pristine despite the ordeal she'd endured. "She assumed I had stolen the car, Robert. She keyed the driver's side, called me several racial slurs, and told me that people like me don't belong in neighborhoods like this. When I tried to show her my keys and registration, she said I must have stolen those too." Chief Carter's jaw worked as he processed his wife's calm recounting of the harassment. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides as he fought to maintain his professional demeanor while dealing with the knowledge that his wife had been subjected to racist attacks in their own neighborhood. "She called 911 and told them I was armed and dangerous," Dr. Laura Simmons continued, her voice steady despite the gravity of what she was describing. "She told them I was threatening her and acting erratically, all because she saw me getting out of our car in front of our house." The neighborhood had gone completely still. Even the children who had been playing in distant yards had stopped their games, sensing the tension that radiated from the scene. Tyler Johnson's live stream was capturing every word, every expression, every moment of this devastating revelation. Deborah Fleming tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words that could somehow undo what had been said and recorded. I didn't know. I mean, how was I supposed to know that she was what?" Chief Carter repeated, taking a step toward Deborah Fleming. "My wife? A doctor? A human being deserving of basic respect? Which part exactly were you unable to determine? Officer Daniel Murphy and Officer Rachel Collins exchanged glances that spoke volumes. They were witnessing their respected chief discover that his wife had been the victim of a hate crime, and they could see him struggling to balance his personal outrage with his professional responsibilities. Mrs. Gloria Henderson stepped forward from the crowd, her blue jacket bright in the afternoon sun. "Officer, I saw the whole thing. This woman," she pointed at Deborah Fleming, "was absolutely vicious. She used language that I won't repeat, and she deliberately damaged that car while Dr. Simmons tried to reason with her." "Dr. Simmons?" Officer Rachel Collins asked, recognition dawning in her voice. "Dr. Laura Simmons," Mrs. Gloria Henderson confirmed. "She's the head of trauma surgery at City General. She saved my grandson's life last year when he was in that accident, and this woman has been treating her like a criminal for the past 20 minutes. The revelation added another layer to the unfolding disaster. Not only had Deborah Fleming attacked the police chief's wife, but she had attacked one of the city's most respected medical professionals, a woman who had literally saved lives in their community. Deborah Fleming's legs seemed to weaken as the full scope of her mistake became clear. She reached out toward Chief Carter with shaking hands. "Please, I didn't know. This is all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. I made an honest mistake. Surely you can understand that I was just being cautious." "Cautious?" Dr. Laura Simmons asked, her voice carrying a note of steel that hadn't been there before. "You vandalized my car, called me racial slurs, and filed a false police report claiming I was armed and dangerous. That's not caution, that's harassment and hate." Tyler Johnson lowered his phone slightly, his young face showing the shock of witnessing such overt racism, followed by its immediate consequences. "Ma'am," he called out to Dr. Laura Simmons, "I got it all on video. Everything she said, everything she did, it's all recorded." Chief Carter nodded grimly at the young man before turning back to his wife. "Laura, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, from the beginning. Officers Murphy and Collins will take your statement, and I'll need to recuse myself from the investigation due to our relationship." Dr. Laura Simmons nodded, understanding the protocols, even as she leaned slightly toward her husband for support. "I was coming home from the hospital after a 14-hour surgery. I parked in our usual spot and was getting my medical bag from the back seat when she approached me." Deborah Fleming tried once more to interject. "Please, I can explain. I didn't realize who she was. If I had known she was your wife, if I had known she was a doctor, I never would have." Chief Carter turned to face her fully, his expression glacial. "So you're saying that if my wife weren't married to a police chief, if she weren't a doctor, your behavior would have been acceptable? You're saying that a person's worth and right to be treated with dignity depends on their connections and profession?" The question hung in the air unanswered because there was no good answer. Deborah Fleming had revealed the depth of her prejudice in trying to excuse it. Her shoulders slumped as she realized that every word she spoke only made her situation worse. Officer Daniel Murphy cleared his throat professionally. "Chief, should we begin processing the scene for vandalism and documenting the false report?" "Yes," Chief Carter replied, his voice returning to its official tone. "And call Detective Pierce. Given the nature of the statements made and the racial component, this needs to be handled as a potential hate crime." The words "hate crime" seemed to hit Deborah Fleming like a physical blow. She staggered slightly, her red cardigan now wrinkled and disheveled from her frantic gestures and growing panic. "Hate crime?" she repeated weakly. No, you don't understand. I'm not a racist. I have black friends. I donate to charities. This was just a misunderstanding. I was protecting my community. Anyone would have done the same thing." Mrs. Gloria Henderson shook her head sadly. "No, dear. Anyone wouldn't have done the same thing. Most of us would have minded our own business, or at most, said hello to a neighbor. What you did was cruel and deliberate." The crowd of neighbors murmured their agreement, and Deborah Fleming looked around desperately for support that simply wasn't there. The phones continued recording, capturing her growing desperation as the reality of her situation became undeniable. Chief Carter placed a protective hand on his wife's shoulder, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light. The simple gesture spoke volumes about their relationship and his commitment to supporting her through this ordeal. "The investigation will proceed by the book," he announced to the gathering crowd. "My wife will be treated like any other victim of harassment and vandalism, and the evidence will speak for itself." Dr. Laura Simmons looked up at her husband with gratitude and love, then turned to face the neighbors who had witnessed her ordeal. Her dignity throughout the entire situation had been remarkable, and now, vindicated and supported, she stood taller. Deborah Fleming made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "This is all being blown out of proportion. I made one small mistake, and now you're all acting like I'm some kind of monster. This isn't fair." But the time for her protests had passed. The evidence was recorded, the witnesses were clear, and the consequences of her racist assumptions were about to begin in earnest. Chief Carter's transformation from concerned husband to commanding police officer was immediate and absolute. The fluorescent streetlights illuminated his determined expression as he stepped forward, his short-sleeved uniform crisp despite the emotional weight of the moment. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows across the pristine neighborhood street as he surveyed the scene with professional eyes that missed nothing. "Officer Murphy," Chief Carter's voice carried the authority of years in command, "I need you to begin documenting this vandalism immediately. Photograph everything, every scratch, every dent, every mark on that vehicle." His gesture toward the Mercedes was deliberate and controlled. "Officer Collins, start taking witness statements from everyone present. I want detailed accounts from each person who observed what happened here today." Officer Daniel Murphy nodded sharply, pulling out his camera equipment, while Officer Rachel Collins approached the gathered neighbors with her notepad ready. The organized response created a bubble of official activity around the vandalized luxury car, transforming what had been Deborah Fleming's stage into a crime scene investigation. Deborah Fleming's face had gone pale beneath her perfectly applied makeup, her red cardigan now seeming to hang awkwardly on her trembling frame. The confidence that had carried her through her racist tirade was crumbling like a house built on sand. She stepped forward desperately, her white skirt wrinkled from her earlier aggressive movements. "Chief Carter, I can explain everything." Deborah Fleming's voice cracked as she spoke, her hands gesturing frantically. "I was protecting our neighborhood. You have to understand, I thought she had stolen that car. It was an honest mistake. I was just being a good citizen, trying to keep our community safe." The words tumbled out of her mouth in a rush, each excuse more desperate than the last. She looked around at the faces surrounding her, searching for sympathy or understanding, but finding only cold stares and recording phones. The neighborhood that she had assumed would support her racist assumptions was now bearing witness to her downfall. Mrs. Gloria Henderson stepped forward, her blue jacket pristine in the bright daylight, her elderly face set with determination. "That's not true, and you know it," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of decades of witnessing injustice. "I heard every word you said to this lady. You called her names I won't repeat. You said she didn't belong here because of the color of her skin." Tyler Johnson moved closer, his orange shirt bright against the manicured landscape, his phone still recording every moment. "I've got it all on video," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She didn't make any mistake. She deliberately keyed that car while calling Dr. Simmons terrible things. She said people like her should know their place." Officer Rachel Collins looked up from her notepad, her professional demeanor masking what had to be shock at the blatant racism being described. "Mrs. Henderson, can you repeat exactly what you heard for my report?" The elderly neighbor's recounting was precise and damning. Each racial slur, each assumption, each moment of deliberate vandalism was laid out in clinical detail. Other neighbors began stepping forward, adding their own observations, creating a comprehensive picture of Deborah Fleming's racist attack. Dr. Laura Simmons had remained quietly composed throughout the initial police response, but now she moved to stand beside her husband, her green blouse unmarred despite the chaos she had endured. Her voice was calm and professional as she addressed the growing crowd. "I think it's important that everyone understands exactly what happened here today," Dr. Laura Simmons began, her tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard in life or death situations. "I am Dr. Laura Simmons, Chief of Trauma Surgery at City General Hospital. I was returning home from a 36-hour shift where I saved 3 lives, including a child who had been in a terrible accident." The revelation hit the crowd like a physical force. Neighbors who had been recording began exchanging glances of amazement and growing anger. This wasn't just any victim of racism they had been witnessing. This was one of the city's most vital medical professionals, someone who dedicated her life to saving others. Dr. Laura Simmons continued, her voice never rising but somehow commanding absolute attention. "That Mercedes that Mrs. Fleming vandalized isn't stolen. My husband and I purchased it last month to celebrate my promotion to department head. I was proud to finally afford something nice after years of medical school debt and residency salaries." Deborah Fleming's face was cycling through expressions of horror as the full magnitude of her mistake became clear. She had attacked not just an innocent woman, but a doctor whose hands had likely saved people she knew, people she cared about. "Dr. Simmons," Mrs. Gloria Henderson said suddenly, recognition dawning in her eyes, "you operated on my grandson last year, Tommy Henderson. He was in that motorcycle accident on Highway 7. Dr. Laura Simmons smiled gently. "I remember Tommy. Wonderful young man. How is he doing with his physical therapy?" The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. "He's walking again because of you. The other doctors said he might never walk, but you found a way." She turned to face Deborah Fleming with fury in her eyes. "This is the woman you attacked. This is the woman whose car you destroyed. The woman who gave my grandson back his life." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd as the weight of this information settled. Phones that had been recording Deborah Fleming's racism were now capturing her assault on a community hero. The narrative had shifted completely, and there was no way to undo the damage. Officer Daniel Murphy looked up from photographing the scratches on the Mercedes. "Chief, we've got deliberate keying along both sides of the vehicle, damage to the side mirrors, and what appears to be an attempt to damage the tires. This wasn't accidental." The sound of another vehicle approaching drew everyone's attention as an unmarked police car pulled up to the scene. Detective Sandra Pierce emerged, her muscular frame evident even in her professional attire. Her arrival signaled that this incident was being elevated to a higher level of investigation. Chief Carter approached his colleague with the measured steps of someone managing both personal and professional responsibilities. "Detective Pierce, thank you for responding so quickly. We have a situation here that requires hate crime investigation protocols." Detective Sandra Pierce surveyed the scene with experienced eyes, taking in the vandalized vehicle, the crowd of witnesses, and the obvious tension. "Chief Carter, given your personal involvement, I'll be taking lead on this investigation. Can you brief me on what we have?" As Chief Carter provided a professional summary of the incident, Deborah Fleming seemed to shrink into herself. The reality of facing hate crime charges was clearly beginning to penetrate her panic. She looked desperately at the faces around her, searching for any sign of support or sympathy, but finding only contempt and disappointment. Tyler Johnson approached Detective Pierce, his phone still in his hands. "Detective, I've got video of everything. The whole attack, all the racist things she said, the vandalism, everything. I can send it to you right now." Other neighbors began stepping forward with their own recordings and witness accounts. The case against Deborah Fleming was building rapidly, with multiple forms of evidence and numerous credible witnesses. Her attempt to destroy Dr. Laura Simmons had instead created an ironclad case against herself. Dr. Laura Simmons moved closer to her husband, her voice low but clear. "Robert, Mrs. Fleming's husband James had surgery at our hospital 6 months ago. I consulted on his case, heart surgery. I recommended the surgeon who saved his life." The irony was devastating. Deborah Fleming had viciously attacked the very doctor whose expertise had helped save her own husband's life. The woman she had assumed was a criminal had actually been instrumental in keeping her family intact. Detective Sandra Pierce began setting up her investigation area, her methodical approach creating an official atmosphere that made the seriousness of the charges clear. "Mrs. Fleming, I need to advise you that you're being investigated for multiple charges including vandalism, filing a false police report, and hate crime violations." The legal reality was crashing down on Deborah Fleming like a tsunami. Her desperate attempts at explanation had failed. The witnesses against her were numerous and credible, and the evidence was overwhelming. She had gone from feeling powerful and righteous to facing potential jail time and permanent criminal record. Officer Rachel Collins finished taking the last witness statement and approached Detective Pierce with her notepad full of damning testimony. The professional machinery of justice was moving forward, methodical and unstoppable. Chief Carter looked at his wife with a mixture of pride and concern. "Laura, are you sure you're okay? Do you need medical attention?" Dr. Laura Simmons shook her head, her composure remarkable given what she had endured. "I'm fine, Robert, but I want to make sure this is handled properly. What happened here today can't be allowed to happen to anyone else." The afternoon sun continued to shine down on the scene, but the atmosphere had completely transformed. Where Deborah Fleming had once stood confident in her racist assumptions, she now faced the crushing weight of justice. Where Dr. Racist Laura Simmons had been attacked and humiliated, she now stood vindicated and supported by her entire community. Detective Sandra Pierce looked up from her evidence collection, her expression serious but satisfied. "We have everything we need to move forward with formal charges. This is one of the most well-documented hate crime cases I've ever seen." The tables had turned completely, and there was no going back. The tension in the upscale neighborhood reached its crescendo as Chief Robert Carter stood beside his wife, Dr. Laura Simmons, their vandalized Mercedes gleaming under the bright afternoon sun despite the scratches marring its pristine surface. The fluorescent white daylight cast sharp shadows across the gathering crowd of neighbors, each holding phones that captured every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. Chief Carter's jaw tightened as he surveyed the damage to their vehicle, then looked at his wife's composed face. Despite everything Deborah Fleming had put her through, Dr. Laura Simmons maintained her dignity in her green blouse and dark pants, standing tall against the backdrop of their upscale home. "I need to recuse myself from this arrest," Chief Carter announced, his voice carrying the weight of professional protocol despite the personal nature of the situation. His short-sleeved police uniform bore the insignia of his rank, but in this moment, he was first and foremost a husband protecting his wife. "Detective Pierce will take the lead on the formal charges." Detective Sandra Pierce stepped forward, her muscular frame commanding attention as she approached Deborah Fleming, who stood trembling in her red cardigan and white skirt. The detective's presence brought an air of inevitability to the proceedings, her years of experience evident in every measured movement. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," Detective Pierce announced, her voice cutting through the morning air with professional authority. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Deborah Fleming's face crumpled as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her like a tidal wave. The woman who had been so confident in her racist assumptions just minutes before now stood face to face with the consequences of her actions. Her hands shook as Detective Pierce continued reading the Miranda rights, each word hammering home the severity of her predicament. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Detective Pierce continued, pulling out handcuffs that gleamed in the bright daylight. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you? Tyler Johnson held his phone steady, live streaming every moment to his growing online audience. His orange shirt stood out against the crowd of neighbors who had gathered to witness this extraordinary turn of events. Comments flooded his stream as viewers from around the world watched justice unfold in real time. "This can't be happening," Deborah Fleming whispered, her voice breaking as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. I assumed." Mrs. Gloria Henderson stepped forward, her blue jacket pristine in the morning light. The elderly woman's voice carried decades of wisdom and moral clarity as she addressed the scene before her. "You didn't assume anything, dear. You saw a successful black woman and decided she didn't belong here. That's not assumption, that's prejudice." Captain William Foster arrived in an unmarked vehicle, his presence adding another layer of oversight to the sensitive situation. His muscular build and authoritative demeanor immediately commanded respect from the gathering crowd. As Chief Carter's superior, he understood the delicate nature of the circumstances and the need for absolute transparency in the proceedings. "Chief Carter, I'll be overseeing this arrest to ensure everything is handled by the book," Captain Foster announced, his voice carrying across the neighborhood. "The department wants to make sure there's no question about the integrity of this investigation." Dr. Laura Simmons watched as her attacker was led toward the police vehicle, but there was no satisfaction in her expression, only a quiet dignity that spoke to her character. She had endured racist slurs, seen her property vandalized, and been falsely accused of crimes. Yet she maintained the composure that had made her one of the city's most respected surgeons. News vans began arriving as word of the incident spread through social media. News reporter Michelle Park stepped out of her vehicle, her red blazer vibrant under the natural skylight that illuminated the scene. She approached Dr. Laura Simmons with the respectful distance that the situation demanded. "Dr. Simmons, I'm Michelle Park from Channel 7 News. Would you be willing to share your thoughts about what happened here today?" the reporter asked, her microphone extended but not intrusive. Dr. Laura Simmons took a deep breath before responding, her voice steady and measured. "What happened today is unfortunately not uncommon for many people in our community. A woman saw me, made assumptions based on the color of my skin, and decided I didn't belong in my own neighborhood. She vandalized my property and filed a false police report, putting not only me but the responding officers in a potentially dangerous situation." As Dr. Laura Simmons spoke, more neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion and the growing media presence. Each testimony painted a picture of a woman who had served their community with distinction, who had saved lives and made their neighborhood better through her presence. "Dr. Simmons performed emergency surgery on my grandson last year," shared one elderly neighbor, stepping forward despite the chaos around them. "She stayed with our family for hours, making sure he was stable. She's a hero in our community." Another neighbor, a middle-aged man in a green shirt and blue jacket, nodded vigorously. "She runs free medical clinics downtown every Saturday. I've seen her there with my own eyes, helping people who can't afford health care. And this woman had the audacity to suggest she doesn't belong here?" Deborah Fleming, now seated in the back of Detective Pierce's patrol car, could hear every word through the open windows. Each testimony was another nail in the coffin of her reputation, another piece of evidence that her racist assumptions had led her to attack one of the community's most valuable members. The weight of her actions seemed to fully hit Deborah Fleming as she sat behind the protective glass. Her makeup ran down her cheeks as she realized that her moment of racist rage had not only destroyed her standing in the community, but potentially her freedom as well. The charges against her were serious: vandalism, filing a false police report, and hate crimes. Each carried significant penalties, but the social consequences would likely prove even more devastating. Detective Pierce approached Chief Carter with her preliminary report. "We have multiple witnesses to the vandalism, racial slurs, and the false 9/11 call. Tyler Johnson's live stream captured most of the incident, and several neighbors have additional footage. This is going to be a very strong case." Mrs. Gloria Henderson organized the gathering neighbors, ensuring they provided contact information to Detective Pierce for follow-up interviews. Her natural leadership shone through as she coordinated witness statements while maintaining the respectful atmosphere the situation demanded. "We all saw what happened here today," she announced to the crowd. "This is our chance to stand up for what's right, to show that our community doesn't tolerate hatred and prejudice." As the formal arrest procedures continued, more details of Dr. Laura Simmons' contributions to the community emerged. Neighbors shared stories of her volunteer work, her leadership in local charity drives, and her husband's progressive reforms in the police department. The picture that emerged was of a power couple dedicated to making their city better for everyone. Chief Carter has been working to improve police-community relations since he took office, shared Officer Daniel Murphy, who had responded to the original call. His wife is the head of trauma surgery at City General. They're exactly the kind of people who make our community stronger. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present that Deborah Fleming had called the police on the police chief's wife, filing false charges against a woman who had likely saved more lives than most people could imagine. The racist assumptions that had driven her attack were now exposed for the entire community to see and judge. Tyler Johnson's live stream had gained thousands of viewers, with comments pouring in from around the world. The story was already spreading across social media platforms, turning what had started as a local incident into a national conversation about racism, assumptions, and justice. The response online is incredible. Tyler shared with his growing audience. People are sharing stories about Dr. Simmons' work at the hospital, her community service, and how she and Chief Carter have been working to make positive changes in our city. As Deborah Fleming was transported away from the scene, the neighborhood began to coalesce around Dr. Laura Simmons and Chief Carter. What had started as an attack on one woman had become a rallying point for community solidarity and a rejection of the racist assumptions that had driven the incident. Captain Foster addressed the media presence that continued to grow. "Today we saw an example of how false assumptions and prejudice can lead to serious criminal charges, but we also saw a community come together to support one of its most valued members and reject the hatred that was directed at her." The afternoon sun continued to shine brightly on the scene, illuminating not just the physical space, but the moral clarity that had emerged from the confrontation. Justice was being served, the community was rallying around truth and dignity, and the consequences of racist actions were playing out for everyone to witness. Dr. Laura Simmons looked around at her neighbors, at the support that surrounded her, and at her husband who had watched his wife handle this crisis with the same grace and strength she brought to saving lives in the hospital. The attack on her had failed, not just because of her husband's position, but because her character and contributions to the community spoke louder than Deborah Fleming's prejudiced assumptions ever could. The arrest marked not just the end of Deborah Fleming's racist tantrum, but the beginning of her reckoning with the consequences of letting prejudice override humanity and truth. 3 weeks after Deborah Fleming's arrest, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Oakwood Community Center, casting natural light across the bustling preparation area. Mrs. Gloria Henderson, dignified in her blue jacket and navy slacks, supervised volunteers arranging white tablecloths and golden sunflower centerpieces for what the neighborhood had dubbed the Community Heroes Appreciation Luncheon. "Those flowers go on the main table," she directed Tyler Johnson, who had traded his usual orange shirt for a crisp green button-down and khaki pants for the special occasion. "Dr. Simmons deserves nothing but the best after what she's been through." Tyler carefully positioned the arrangements, his phone buzzing constantly with notifications. His live stream of Deborah Fleming's racist attack had garnered over 2 million views, transforming him from a casual neighborhood observer into an accidental social justice advocate. Comments poured in from viewers worldwide, praising his courage to document injustice and stand up for what was right. "Mrs. Henderson, Channel 7 News wants to interview me again," Tyler said, glancing at his screen. "They're calling it a watershed moment for bystander activism." The elderly woman smiled, adjusting a centerpiece with practiced hands. "You did the right thing, son. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to shine light on darkness." Dr. Simmons always taught us that in her neighborhood safety meetings across town at City General Hospital, Dr. Laura Simmons moved through the trauma bay with characteristic precision, her green scrubs and white coat pristine despite the intensity of her morning surgery schedule. The fluorescent lights above highlighted her focused expression as she sutured the final layer of a construction worker's lacerated forearm, her skilled hands steady and sure. "Doctor, that was incredible," said resident Dr. Marcus Williams, observing from beside the surgical table. "The way you navigated around that nerve damage, I've never seen technique like that." Dr. Simmons secured the final suture and stepped back, pulling off her surgical gloves. 15 years of practice, Dr. Williams. Every hand that comes through these doors deserves our absolute best, regardless of who they are or where they come from." Her voice carried quiet strength, the same dignity she'd maintained during Deborah Fleming's vicious attack. Nurse Patricia Coleman approached with an enormous bouquet of mixed flowers. "Dr. Simmons, these just arrived from the Oakwood Neighborhood Association. The card says, 'Thank you for showing us what grace under pressure looks like.'" Dr. Simmons read the card, her eyes softening with genuine emotion. The outpouring of community support had been overwhelming. Letters arrived daily from patients whose lives she'd saved, neighbors sharing stories of her quiet acts of service, and colleagues praising her handling of the incident that had shocked the entire city. "The community meeting tonight is going to be packed," Nurse Coleman continued. "I heard they're expecting over 300 people. Even the mayor wants to attend." Meanwhile, in the sterile confines of the county courthouse, Deborah Fleming sat beside her attorney in an orange jumpsuit, her usual red attire replaced by the harsh reality of her circumstances. The fluorescent courtroom lights were unforgiving as Judge Patricia Morales reviewed the extensive case file, her expression stern as she read the charges aloud. "Mrs. Fleming, you stand accused of filing a false police report, criminal vandalism, intimidation based on race, and harassment. The evidence against you includes multiple video recordings, witness testimony, and documented property damage." Judge Morales looked up from the papers. "How do you plead?" Defense attorney Michael Roberts whispered urgently to his client before standing. "Your Honor, Mrs. Fleming pleads guilty to all charges and throws herself on the mercy of the court." The guilty plea sent ripples through the courtroom gallery, where several Oakwood neighbors sat witnessing the legal consequences of racism. Deborah Fleming's fall from her perceived social pedestal had been swift and complete. Her resignation from the Neighborhood Watch, Garden Club, and PTA had made local headlines, while social media continued to dissect her attack on Dr. Simmons with brutal efficiency. Judge Morales consulted her notes before speaking. "Mrs. Fleming, your actions represent a particularly egregious example of racial bias and false reporting that could have had devastating consequences for Dr. Simmons. This court sentences you to 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service focused on racial reconciliation education, and full restitution for damages to the victim's vehicle." As bailiffs led Deborah Fleming away, her former neighbors watched justice being served, knowing that her social exile was just beginning. Real estate agents reported that the Fleming house had quietly gone on the market as the family prepared to relocate away from the community that had witnessed their matriarch's racist breakdown. That evening, the Oakwood Community Center overflowed with residents, city officials, and hospital staff who had come to honor Dr. Laura Simmons and Police Chief Robert Carter. The venue's bright overhead lighting illuminated a sea of faces from every demographic, united in their appreciation for two public servants who embodied the community's highest values. Dr. Simmons entered wearing an elegant emerald blouse and black slacks, her natural grace evident as neighbors applauded warmly. Chief Carter, handsome in his dress uniform with short sleeves showing his strong forearms, walked beside his wife with obvious pride and protective awareness. Mayor Jennifer Walsh took the microphone, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. We gather tonight to celebrate two extraordinary individuals who serve our city with distinction every single day. Dr. Laura Simmons has saved countless lives in our hospital, while Chief Robert Carter has worked tirelessly to build trust between our police department and the communities we serve. Tyler Johnson approached the microphone next, his nervousness evident, but his message clear. 3 weeks ago, I witnessed something that changed how I see my role in this community. When I saw Mrs. Fleming attacking Dr. Simmons based on nothing but racist assumptions, I had a choice: stay silent or speak up. Dr. Simmons showed incredible dignity that day, but more importantly, she showed us what courage looks like when facing hatred. The young man's voice grew stronger as he continued. My live stream has been viewed millions of times, and people keep asking me why I didn't just mind my own business. But here's what I learned. Dr. Simmons' business is our business because she's been taking care of all of us. She saved my grandmother's life 2 years ago during a heart attack. She runs free health clinics every month. She and Chief Carter have made our neighborhood safer and stronger. Applause filled the room as Tyler returned to his seat, his mother beaming with pride at her son's growth into community leadership. Mrs. Gloria Henderson rose slowly, commanding attention with her dignified presence in her blue jacket and pearls. I've lived in Oakwood for 37 years, and I've watched this neighborhood change and grow. But I've never been prouder of our community than I am right now. Not because of how we handled the ugliness we witnessed, but because of how we chose to respond with love, support, and unity. Her voice carried decades of wisdom and experience. Dr. Simmons and Chief Carter represent the very best of what public service should be. They've never asked for recognition or praise. They just quietly serve with excellence every single day. When hatred tried to diminish Dr. Simmons, we saw her true character shine even brighter. Dr. Simmons finally approached the microphone, her poise evident as she surveyed the crowded room. Thank you all for this incredible evening, but I need to be clear about something. What happened 3 weeks ago wasn't really about me. It was about the assumptions and biases that still exist in our society. Deborah Fleming saw a black woman with a nice car and immediately assumed criminality. That's a problem we all need to address. Her voice remained steady, professional, compassionate despite the personal attack she'd endured. I don't want anyone to think this incident defines our community, because it doesn't. Your response defines our community. Mrs. Henderson organizing tonight's event, Tyler having the courage to document injustice, neighbors stepping forward with support and witness testimony. That's who we really are. Dr. Simmons paused, looking around the room at faces both familiar and new. I've been a trauma surgeon for 15 years, and I've learned that healing requires acknowledging wounds before they can properly mend. Our community had a wound exposed that day, but watching how you've all responded gives me tremendous hope. Chief Carter joined his wife at the microphone, his strong presence commanding attention. As police chief, I want to address what happened from a law enforcement perspective. My officers responded professionally to what they believed was an emergency call, but the situation they found was a false report based on racial bias. This is exactly the kind of incident that damages trust between police and communities. His voice carried authority mixed with personal emotion. I'm proud that our department handled this situation with integrity, but I'm even prouder that this community chose truth over prejudice. When you see injustice, speak up like Tyler did. When you see hatred, respond with love like Mrs. Henderson did. When you see assumptions, counter them with facts like all our neighbors did that day. As the evening progressed, person after person shared stories of Dr. Simmons' impact on their lives. Maria Rodriguez spoke about the night Dr. Simmons saved her son after a car accident. James Patterson described how she'd stayed late to perform emergency surgery on his wife. Sarah Mitchell tearfully recounted how Dr. Simmons had gently explained treatment options when her father was dying, providing medical expertise wrapped in genuine compassion. Each testimony painted a picture of a woman whose daily life contradicted every racist assumption Deborah Fleming had made. Here was someone who spent her days saving lives, her evenings supporting community initiatives, and her weekends providing free medical care to underserved populations. Young Ashley Chen, a high school student, approached the microphone with nervous energy. Dr. Simmons probably doesn't remember me, but she spoke at our career day last year. She told us that excellence isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up every day ready to serve others. When I saw that video of Mrs. Fleming attacking her, I couldn't believe anyone would treat someone so accomplished and kind with such disrespect. The teenager's voice grew stronger as she continued. But watching how Dr. Simmons handled it, staying calm and dignified, that taught me more about character than any textbook ever could. She's my role model, and I want to be a doctor just like her. Dr. Simmons dabbed at her eyes, moved by the young woman's words. This was why she'd chosen medicine, why she endured the long hours and high stress, why she'd maintained her composure even while facing Deborah Fleming's vicious attack. As the evening wound down, Tyler Johnson made one final announcement. I want everyone to know that the GoFundMe page we started for Dr. Simmons' vandalized car raised enough money to not only cover repairs, but also fund her free clinic for the next 6 months. When hatred tried to tear us apart, love brought us together stronger than before. Dr. Simmons stood once more, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. This community has shown me something beautiful tonight. You've proven that when we stand together against prejudice, when we choose to see each other's humanity instead of making assumptions, when we support each other through difficult times, we become stronger than any hatred directed against us. She looked around the room at the faces that had become family, the neighbors who had witnessed her worst day and responded with their best selves. Deborah Fleming thought she knew who I was based on my appearance. She was wrong about everything that mattered. But you, this community, you've taken time to actually know me, to understand my contributions, to see my character. That's the difference between prejudice and relationship. Chief Carter wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders as the crowd rose in sustained applause. The image captured by news reporter Michelle Park's photographer would run on the front page of the next morning's paper. A portrait of love triumphing over hate, community healing, overcoming division. As neighbors filed out into the warm evening air, conversations continued on sidewalks and in driveways. Children who had attended with their parents asked questions about fairness and treating people with respect. Adults made plans for future community events. Strengthened bonds forged through shared witness to both ugliness and beauty. Mrs. Gloria Henderson locked the community center doors, satisfied with an evening that had honored 2 deserving individuals while teaching everyone present about the power of standing together against injustice. Tyler Johnson uploaded highlights from the appreciation event, his social media platform now dedicated to sharing positive community stories. Dr. Laura Simmons returned home to the neighborhood where she belonged, where she was known and valued, where her luxury Mercedes sat safely in her driveway without question or assumption. Tomorrow she would return to the hospital, to her life-saving work, to her quiet service that needed no recognition beyond the healing it provided. The Oakwood neighborhood had faced its ugliest moment and emerged stronger, more unified, more committed to seeing each other's full humanity. Deborah Fleming's racist attack had backfired completely, creating deeper appreciation for Dr. Simmons, while exposing the hollowness of prejudicial thinking. Justice had been served not just in the courtroom, but in the hearts of a community that chose love over fear, truth over assumption, unity over division. In trying to diminish Dr. Laura Simmons, Deborah Fleming had only made her light shine brighter, illuminating the path forward for everyone willing to walk it together. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.